Kingston Town can't win.
Burton Crusher and our Waverley Star, straight for straight.
Cometh the hour, cometh the legend, Winks has done it.
Alrighty, we're joined by the voice of racing, Matty Hill, here in Victoria. Matty, you're the first repeat guest on the podcast, so welcome again. How are you feeling ahead of the 2023 Spring Carnival?
Well, that either means that I come cheap or that I stuffed it up the first time. So lovely to see Ben and Troy. Very excited. Fresh, raring to go. We've had a fantastic Memsie Stakes at Caulfield, and I think everyone just really got into the mood after that meeting last week. So, no, looking forward to it. It's I can't believe that the Cox Plate's not far away again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we covered off a bit last year more about your kind of journey in racing so far, but we thought we'd get straight into the action and look back on what was a monster carnival out here last year, but probably starting with the Big A looking Destiny in the face and winning the centenary Ladbrokes Cox Plate. Your memories from that day?
Well, it's a terrific race and it's set up beautifully with Animo. I think the year before with State of Rest and the protest and all the drama and the Channel 7 cameras trying to get into the steward's room and look under that curtain to try and work out what was going on in the steward's room probably set it up really well for the year after, particularly the story of Animo. And people were sort of saying, oh, it's redemption. Don't know if it was really redemption because he didn't really have to redeem himself for anything. He'd almost won it. So there was an element of that underdog coming through with Animo that even though he was, obviously owned by Godolphin, James Cummings, James McDonald, they're not really underdogs. We wouldn't see them as underdogs in racing. But it was that I think it appealed to that Australian sports fan that he virtually got robbed the year before to come and try and win the Cox Plate. And so it set it up beautifully, and it obviously set it up beautifully for a race caller's narrative as well. And it panned out superbly. And you always knew that I'm Thunderstruck was going to come roaring home at some point, and you could argue that I'm Thunderstruck was highly unlucky in the race. So the whole theatre of the race matched what a Cox Plate always is. It was brilliant to call it.
The two lines, Troy touched on one quickly, but Zaki joined by Animo, who looks Destiny in the face, and then when the crowd went up on the line this time for the Big A, how'd you culminate those two great lines? Because they really did make the race.
Well, I've always said it, there's a bit of a junkyard going on up here of just lines and thoughts and emotions and feelings. The thing about racing is you'll never bring back a feeling from a race day. And
Zaki joined by Animo, who looks Destiny in the face.
The Destiny looks Destiny in the face. I'm always fascinated by athletes, albeit at an Olympics or 2 minutes towards the end of a grand final or standing there before a stall gift in the silence, that beautiful silence before the gun goes off, or a horse coming for home in a Cox Plate. They're literally staring it down, and Animo was in that case. He'd got past Zaki, so he'd fought Zaki off, and we knew a few were going to come wandering home, but it was there for Animo to be beaten, really. And all that was between him and then finally winning the Cox Plate that he didn't win the year before was literally looking it down, staring it down in the face. It changes the lives of people around the horse. It changes the horse's life. It's it's a big thing. So to come for home at Moonee Valley with only 150 to go, with 20,000 screaming fans, he's looking at straight gun barrel down the eye, and that was the inspiration for that.
This time for the Big A.
And the Big O, it was about 3 weeks ago. I can thank Michael Felgate for that. I've never even told him this, but he was doing an interview, I think, on Caulfield Guineas Day, and when Animo was running in the Might and Power and asked James Cummings, is the Big A going to win today? And it just sort of curled around in my head for a few weeks.
And the build-up to last year's race was obviously more special, being the centenary year, and I think we built up the narrative and the story of our great race quite well. And one of those key kind of the storylines was the return of the Valley Roar, with us not having crowds for 2 years. And for us, having crowds back was amazing. So I can imagine for you too, that probably helps your performance on the day and helps you build into it with having 20,000 screaming fans here on the day.
Well, the reality of any event is it doesn't really matter a lot of the time what the event is. If you've got a lot of people there, it's an event, isn't it? So even though we were running Cox Plates in front of nobody, the race was fantastic, but the event wasn't there. So to have that crowd, and I think Moonee Valley lends itself to that roar. I think the way the track design, the way they come down the side, and the runs are starting to be made at about the 500, 600. The crowd can sort of go with the horses, and by the time they come round the turn, the horses are at full pelt, and the crowd is as well. So it's a wonderful thing to be at Moonee Valley on Cox Plate Day, just for that reason, the famous roar.
Last year, the Ladbrokes Manikato Stakes was postponed, obviously, after the big lightning strike. Runners race 11 the next day, and Ballinipatina, boy, doesn't she deserve this. Take us through that race, and obviously it's been that much of a success that we're having them both on the same day this year.
Yeah, well, it worked, didn't it? I mean, this was the thing that we sort of fell across it the night before. Geez, I tell you what, that lightning strike.
I was going to say,
gee whiz.
What was the view like from up there? Because they would have come down straight in front of you.
I was on the roof and had the headphones on, and I remember looking at, I think it was Coolangatta was going onto the track from memory.
Same barrier when victorious in the Moya. That was the loudest clap of thunder I've ever heard, Hutch. That was right above us as well. Obviously, we're going to have things amended right now, but Coolangatta would have been a great chance. That was quite frightening, to be perfectly honest.
And bang, and it sort of pushed me back, and it was almost that come from nowhere. It actually felt like a bomb had gone off, and it felt like that it wasn't lightning, that it was something else. So it was crazy. And I remember walking down to the scales area after we'd run 5 races, and they were talking about the 11th race, and that was obviously going to be announced. And I think Craig Williams walked past, and he couldn't wait to get out of the place. I think he wanted me as a security guard because he needed a bit of shelter. It was all quite unnerving, wasn't it, on the night? But then on the Saturday, when Ballinipatina roared to victory in race 11, it worked. It actually worked. That after the Cox Plate, we didn't sort of go into a lull. We had one race, and then we went up again to another Group 1.
Streaking away, Ballinipatina, and boy, doesn't she deserve this. Ballinipatina 4 legs.
We sort of stumbled across that, but it's going to be great this year.
And just going back to a little bit earlier in the year, you had the opportunity to fly over and call at Royal Ascot. Imagine that was pretty special for you.
Yeah, I mean, Royal Ascot is obviously one of the great meetings of the world, and it's got to the stage where all of the jurisdictions tend to meet there as well. It's almost like a conference. So it was great to be there, and it's an amazing thing, Royal Ascot, that you have to wear this silly hat and a silly coat, and but everyone does it, and you sort of feel out of it if you're not wearing that sort of garb. But the horse flesh is fantastic, and I love the variety at Royal Ascot. You've got the staying races, the 4,000 metre Gold Cup. Then you've got the 2-year-old races to start off each day, like the Chesham and the Norfolk and all of the Albany, all those races, Coventry Stakes, and then the great milers and the great 3-year-olds. So it's a terrific meeting to do, and I loved it. I'm hooked now. I'll be hopefully going back every year.
And looked like a decent presence from racing clubs across Australia. I know we had a couple of representatives from Moonee Valley, the Chief and our chairman.
The Chief was there. I ran into the Chief at Windsor, and he was having a great time. We were quite taken back by even a visit to Windsor Racecourse. The jockeys' room is about 400 yards from the mounting enclosure. So where the crowd is, the jockeys literally walk through the crowd to get to their horses. And I could see the Chief's mind just ticking, going, "This is interesting. I wonder what we can do." And a few of it was a twilight fixture, and it works at Windsor. It's a Monday night fixture during the summer, and it's an absolute lay-down success. So I think Michael took home some ideas.
There you go.
So this week, Ladbrokes Cox Plate week this year, 18 races. The acceptances come out on a Wednesday morning. Can you just talk the punters through how you prepare for that and how you study those races? I know you also have to give out some tips these days.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, because it's a busy day that Wednesday, because it's also Geelong Cup Day. So I'm usually at Geelong, and then by the time I get back home, I'm sort of doing the form. Probably do Cox Plate Day first, and then have to give the tips, and then we work on Friday night after that. So, but that's the best part. I quite like the solace of my office at home on the Thursday afternoon and just looking through the history of the races and the speed maps and everything else that the race caller needs to know. But you're right, we're going to have 18 races. There's a lot of horses to get your head around. But as my great hero Greg Miles always said, you just pick one off each. You just pick one race at a time. One race at a time, just pick them off. And hopefully the biggest challenge for me is getting a good night's sleep on the Friday night. What we do is very mental. It's a very concentration-based game. So to get home on the Friday night with your head still spinning and then knowing full well you've got one of the big races on the Saturday to call, that you call all year. So that's the challenge.
Yeah, looking into this spring, some of the, I guess, the weight for age champs have retired on the weekend. We had Eduardo and Nature Strip retire, and our Cox Plate champ, Animo, retired to stud. But I think, it opens the door for some new talent to come through. And obviously now with the internationals coming back too, it's this spring doesn't really have it's set up for something different this year, which I think is quite exciting. So what are your kind of storylines that you're looking into for this spring?
So at this early stage, because I remember having this exact conversation with you 12 months ago, and we were talking about Animo, weren't we? So we can dream it up right here, right now. Obviously Romantic Warrior is a very interesting horse. So we've had Japan. We've obviously had Sir Dragonet from Europe and possibly now Hong Kong as a storyline, because State of Rest was Ireland, wasn't it? So, so we've got a different country starting to stake a claim now. Obviously, Mr. Brightside's a horse that we're following. The Australian punters will be following through, and hopefully he'll get to a Cox Plate. Gee, the celebrations will be something if Mr. Brightside wins a Cox Plate. I hope you guys have got enough owners' tickets and champagne if that happens.
I know one of the owners, so I can tell you he'll be rowdy here on Cox Plate.
Yeah, I think so. And of course, you've got the up-and-comers. I mean, we're seeing Globe and a Fee and Stakes. Is that a Cox Plate chance? I'd be interested to even see a horse like Gold Trip, who was pretty luckless in the Cox Plate last year. And you look back in hindsight and think, geez, why didn't we find it for the Melbourne Cup? It was a terrific run in the Cox Plate. So there's a lot to play out.
Just on Brightside, obviously just coming off a big win in the Memsie, is he kind of gone to a new level for you now after the weekend, or have always held him in a really kind of high regard?
Oh, he's always been in a high regard, particularly at a mile. The 2040 is another conversation altogether. But, I think he has improved somewhat, and his preparation's been a shade different this time. So we're not going to obviously be seeing him in a Fee, and he's heading to the Mackay now. But, maybe a little bit of a different preparation. I would expect him to run a very big race in a Cox Plate.
This week is Ladbrokes Cox Plate qualifier week. We've got the Clam Seafood Fan Stakes, which holds the golden ticket, obviously, into the Ladbrokes Cox Plate. That features the likes of your Globes, Attrition, Pinstripe, Tuvalu. And then, of course, in the Middies McEwen Stakes, we've got Gear Kick versus Imperatriz. How much are you looking forward to this Saturday?
And I think we can throw in Acromantula as well, can we? After winning last week. I think the sprint race is going to outdo the Fian because everyone's going to be talking Giga Kick when they get here. Interesting, Giga Kick's 1,000 metres, not his absolute plumb distance. So I'll be very interested to see what Imperatriz does. Tiago, of course, is setting up base now here at Cranbourne. So they're going to try and stake a claim. I'd still be almost in the corner of Acromantula. If he can get a little bit of peace up front, which I know is ridiculous to say for a 1,000-metre race, depending on who's in the race, smallish field, Giga Kick's going to be having his wheels spin fair way from home, and he's such a good horse. And obviously there's bigger fish to fry. But, there's the 50-50 with Giga Kick. Probably on class, he wins the race, but distance, query.
And then a few weeks later, we've got the return of our Ladbrokes Friday Night Lights racing, which we all know and love. And that night is set to be a massive one. Here we've got the likes of Asfura and Imperatriz looking to run in the Moya, and then the WA star Amelia's Jewel looking likely to kind of start her spring prep in the Stock Stakes. So we're getting some pretty good horses, and it's a lot to look forward to, I think, for racing fans and Moonee Valley Racing Club members. And I'm sure for you the same, calling these great horses at this unique track obviously would be pretty special for you.
There's something about that meeting meeting, that first meeting. So it's grand final eve. So everybody's up and about initially, and you turn the lights on a Friday night, and there's something very exhilarating about that first meeting. And you talked about the Moira. I mean, Asfura, love Asfura. I mean, she's just a winner. I mean, she just never runs a bad one. So I'm sure she'll be in that race up to her ears for Henry Dwyer. And Imperatriz obviously is going to be there. Always a great race, the Moya. 1,000 metres, big fields around the tight terrain of Moonee Valley. It's always dramatic. So you've got to be on your toes calling that one, let me tell you.
Yep.
This spring, what are some of the horses that you haven't called yet that you might be looking forward to calling? We mentioned Romantic Warrior from Hong Kong coming for a Ladbrokes Cox Plate. You might have seen Vauban win over at Royal Ascot.
Yeah, there's a few as far as the stayers go. I'm very keen to see a horse called Mr. Waterville, who won the Irish Cambridge here and did an amazing job. He was 30th halfway through the race and ran over the top of them and won. And the Melbourne Cup has been a long-term plan. I'm also keen of seeing Willie Mullins' horses because I know Willie's very keen to win the Melbourne Cup. He's a massive jumps man in Ireland, obviously very famous. So I'll be very interested to see his horses come here. Vauban's an interesting horse. It's interesting in the evolution of the Melbourne Cup how we've gone from the real out-and-out stayers, that Oscar Schindler type of horse, that 4,000 metre horse, to the evolution of finding almost quick 2-milers in a way from England that can handle racing at tight quarters. And then Vauban didn't have to worry about that at Ascot because it was in isolation most of the way it bolted in. So is it a true 3,200 metre horse or longer? That's the question mark for Vauban. But we've got a lot of opposition this year, even without a fight, who we've had the pleasure of already seeing. I think it's up to the Melbourne Cup up to its ears. But what about Salcombe? Did we see the Melbourne Cup winner last Saturday? You could play devil's advocate and say, walk past unfit stayers and winter horses, but it was the way it did it. I'm a big believer, if you take all that out of it, just the aestheticness of how that horse won, that was something else. His time was quicker than the Cochrane that was run 40 minutes later, and they dawdled in the Cochrane and sprinted home. That was some win. He'll win a Melbourne Cup on that.
And we briefly touched on, we've got the Hong Kong champ Romantic Warrior coming out. That must be exciting for you too to call a horse of his calibre.
Oh, for sure. Any of those international horses. And he's got the paralysing turn of foot that would be very much suited to a Cox Plate as well. So any quality from Hong Kong. And I think Hong Kong's been a little bit untapped as far as their Cox Plate chances over the years. So to see that would be fantastic. And all the theatre and, the spectators and the owners that come with it. So it'll be adding a lot of colour, I'm sure.
Tainer Walters, he's a great man who works for Kieran Maher Racing that you met earlier this year, and he impersonated your 2018 Winx call. Take us through that and how special it is for some of these industry guys to be looking up to you as their idol.
Rostropovich just in front of D'Argento, but here she comes, and the Valley roars. Winx on the outside, moves up, takes the lead from Ben Battle. Rostropovich and D'Argento into the straight at the 200 metres. Winx in front by a length. Ben Battle's going with her. Winx 3/4, Ben Battle. Cometh the hour, cometh the legend. Greatness, Winx has done it. It's equine utopia.
Yeah, I met Tainer at Kieran Maher. He was just simply doing his day's work and came up to me to say hello. And I think someone goaded him to doing an impersonation of the race call. And luckily or unluckily for Tainer, a Racing.com camera crew happened to just be there doing a completely different exercise. I think they were actually interviewing Kieran about his chances over the weekend, and it was a very ad hoc, give us a rendition, Tainer, and it was absolutely superb. So, it's really lovely. I mean, it's one of those things... fundamentally, the race is not about the race caller. We're purely narrating the race and describing the race as accurately as we can. But like anything, I suppose I was turned on by listening to the race callers that I used to listen to on the radio and the TV and could recite their calls. And, it's nice that you play a little part.
And the ownership ranks for yourself. I think we touched on it last year. What's any update there for you? Any good ones going around?
No.
Anything to add to the Black Book?
No, slow ones. We had Hello Broadcast, the group of race callers, and we got lucky with Hello Broadcast, won a couple of Sandown winter races on the lakeside. He became a Goldilocks horse. He had to have it wet, he had to be on the lakeside, and he had to be over 1,200 metres. It just had to have everything go his way. And Barrier 1, and we got that. But so we got a couple of trophies there and pictures on the wall. But no, I've just got a couple of just tinkering around with a couple. I'm in a horse. I wanted to get a picnic horse actually, and by the name of No New Tricks with Alan Keenan and Tiger Keenan, and he's too good for the picnics. He's won a couple of races for us at the professionals, which is nice. And just tinkering around with a couple. But it doesn't matter what quality they are, the bills still have to be paid. They still come through.
Absolutely.
Well, it's prediction time. Last year, you predicted the winner of the 2022 Ladbrokes Cox Plate with Animo. Who goes on top this far out for you?
Who's running? Troy, you're the expert on this. Who's running?
For me, if I'm tipping, it's at this stage, I think Romantic Warrior is that X Factor horse for me. So that's who my tip is with at the moment. But I said the Aussie quality too is looking very strong, and there might be some other international flavour, fingers crossed as well. So it's a tough one, but for me, I'm with the Warrior.
So much to play out. We'll have a 3-year-old bob up at some point as well through Caulfield Guineas, etc.
The Party V8 potentially.
Possibly, yeah. V8's an interesting horse. I'd like to see him get round Moonee Valley. He's a big gross horse V8, isn't he? But he's got the engine. That's why he was named that, I suppose. And even a horse, could Amenable be a sneaky? So what the evidence that we have at this early stage, Romantic Warrior's the P, and I wouldn't be completely knocking Mr. Brightside at this point.
No. And a bit closer than the Cox Plate, we've obviously got this weekend. Your tip in both the feature races, the McEwen and the Clam Seafood Fiend Stakes.
Okay, so the sprint race, I'm still going to give Acromantula a bit of a shout, just because we've seen the horse do it. He's been here. He's run good time. Geez, he ran good time. You'd almost win a Moya running time like that. So he's up and about. He's the horse up and about. Giga Kick's got bigger fish to fry, even though it'll be fantastic to see Giga here. And for the Fian, let's go with Globe. Up-and-comer, good horse. And I'm anticipating Gold Trip to run an absolute cracker.
There you go. And off the racetrack onto another patch of grass, AFL land. Racing fans would have heard your voice across both 7 and SEN. Believe you are scheduled to be calling some of the AFL finals, which is exciting for you, something different.
It is, and it's an open race at the moment. If you had a Cox Plate with the field of 8 we've got in the finals, it's anyone's guess. Melbourne, Collingwood first up. I'm a bit of a believer, and Ben's going to hate me saying this, but I think Collingwood are still the go. I think they're going great guns, and they certainly hit back the other day. So I think Collingwood's, and I reckon Brisbane are the quiet shout.
Yep, agreed. I think Collingwood and maybe I think the Demons are building too, which but I think
it all comes down to Thursday night.
Agreed, night. But I think it's a good AFL finals, and obviously we're looking forward to grand final eve and that night and kicking off that long weekend. It's going to be pretty special.
Have you been dreaming, Benny, of a Carlton premiership? Have you been just going to bed at
every
night?
Every day in the office just talks about it.
Just been talking about it ad nauseum, annoying everybody?
I don't think I can dare to dream. I'm not the type of one to get up and about Carlton, because I've just been let down so many times. But hopefully we can get over this week. It would be a huge disappointment if we couldn't get over Sydney in the first elimination final.
Yeah, and I know you love smartening yourself up, doing your hair, all that sort of stuff. The Cox Plate's just absolutely glistening here. You can just do that in the twinkling of an eye. How busy is the trophy going to be over the next 2 months?
Busy. A lot of it's been interstate a few times for a few different things and a few different reasons. So not as much as the Melbourne Cup. I see that one gets out everywhere. I don't know who runs that, but I wouldn't mind having that same itinerary for the Cox Plate. I can tell you that one.
Where would you take it first?
I reckon we go visit some of those international locations of the winter. So your Ireland, Japan, take it over international, that international flavour. I was in Japan recently, and I'd love an excuse to go back there, and also Ireland as well. But and then maybe Hong Kong if the Warrior gets up this year, this year's Cox Plate. But it's a big build up, and we're looking forward to it, and looking forward to hearing your voice and what you've got in store for race fans. Yeah. This year. It's going
to be fantastic, and that added edition of the Manicato on the Saturday as well just really boasts the card. So it's going to be good, and I think the Moonee Valley Gold Cup having its own night gives it a little bit of an extra push for the stayers.
Running of the Gold Cup. So people do forget that was the big race up until what year, Benny? Up until probably around the 70s, wasn't it? 60s, 70s. Sure. So a lot of history in that race, but looking forward to having you to call it, mate, and thank you for being a guest on the pod today.
My pleasure, anytime, and we'll see you at the Valley. See everybody at the Valley.
And we'll see you back here at the same time next year.
Yeah, well, I look forward to it. So hopefully if we tip another winner, we'll try and go for the three-peat.
Fantastic.
The trilogy.
Thanks,
All right,
mate.
Kingston Town can't win. Bone Crusher and our Waverley Star, straight for straight.
Cometh the hour, cometh the legend, Winks has done it.